Today's video we're going to be finding slope by graphing and using tables. So let's get started. To find slope from a table, you need to use the slope formula. If you can recall, that is the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Remember, it's represented by the change in y over the change in x. So the difference between the y's and the differences between the x's. Remember, it's always y over x. So when we are substituting in two sets of points into the formula and solving for slope, it's okay if the fraction is improper. Sometimes it won't be a nice even number, sometimes it will be. So let's look at our change in y. What's happening from 15 to 10? I'm subtracting 5, yes. And from 10 to 5, it's the same. So we want to make sure that these are all being subtracted by 5. So we have the change in y over the change in x. Let's figure out what the slope is. So we have a negative 5 on the top. And let's look at our x's and see what's going on. So from 0 to 1 is plus 1. 1 to 2 is plus 1, and 2 to 3 is plus 1. So it's totally fine if one of them is negative and one of them is positive, or they're both positive, or they're both negative. You can still be able to find the slope. So negative divided by a positive is a negative. 5 divided by 1 is 5. So my slope is negative 5 for this table. Now let's look at some other tables. So now we're going to be using a table to graph an equation. So first we need to make sure that our equation is in y equals mx plus b form. If you can remember, m is our slope or our rate of change, while b is our y-intercept or our starting point. So now I'm going to look at our equation. For our example, which y equals 4x minus 2, that is in slope-intercept form. Now I need to randomly choose 3 values. You can choose negative numbers, you could choose all positive numbers, whatever floats your boat. For this example, I'm going to choose negative 1, 0, and a positive 2. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to solve and figure out what y is. So I'm going to take my equation, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this negative 1 and place it in for x, because I already know what x equals, which is negative 1 for our first number. So I have 4, and we said negative 1 was our first number. So now I'm going to multiply 4 times negative 1, which is going to give me a negative 4. I didn't do anything yet to that minus 2, so I'm going to bring it down. Negative 4 minus 2 is going to give me a negative 6. So my first y is negative 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put negative 6 in for y, and over here it says for x is negative 1, y is going to be equal to negative 6. If I was going to write that as a point, it'd be negative 1, comma, negative 6. Let's try 0 and see what we get. So same thing, I'm going to take my 0 and plug it in for x. So now I have y equals 4 times 0 minus 2. Anything times 0 is 0. Minus a 2 is going to give me negative 2. So at 0, it's going to be negative 2 for my y. So when x equals 0, y equals negative 2. It's going to be 0, negative 2. I want you to try 2 on your own and see what you are going to get. Alright, so at this point you should have solved it and you should have gotten 6. So at 2, my y is going to be 6. Now let's go graph it, see what it looks like. So we're going to plot our 3 points on our coordinate plane. Remember, x is first, y is second. So I'm going to go x to negative 1, so I'm going to go left 1 and all the way down to negative 6 and put a dot. And I'm going to check it off to show that I've completed it and I graphed it, so I'm not double graphing. So 2 and 6. Alright, so it says check to make sure it creates a straight line. If I look at it, let me get my ruler out and see if I line them all up. Yep, that's going to make a straight line. So now we're going to draw the line through all 3 points. Remember, this is going to be a straight line, so if you don't have a ruler, get a straight edge. Also, remember, anytime we're graphing a line, we have to draw the 2 arrows at the end of the line to show that this is an equation and a line. So now let's practice some examples. So we're going to practice this one together. So they actually gave us our x's, and we just need to solve for y's. So let's plug in all of our x's. So the first one is going to be -3. So 2 times a -3 is going to give me what? -6. Minus a 6 is going to be what? -12. So my first point is -3, -12. So it looks like on my graph I can't get to that point, so that's okay. We're going to move on to the second one. Sometimes it doesn't always reach the graph, and that's completely fine. So now we're going to plug in 0 for x and see what we get. So I have 2 times 0, which is 0, minus my 6 is going to give me a -6. So my second point, I'm going to start at 0 and just go straight down to -6 and put a dot. That one I can actually graph. Then let's figure out what 3 is going to be. Remember, at any time you can pause this video in order to see what's going on, or if we're going too slow or too fast. So 3 times 2 is going to give me a 6, and I subtract it from my y-intercept. 6 minus 6 is 0. So at 3, I'm going to put a 0. So I'm going to go over to 3 on my x-axis, and I'm not going to move up or down. I'm just going to put a dot there. And our last equation, our last x is 6. So pause the video and see what kind of answer you're going to get for this one. So if you plugged in 6, you should have gotten 2 times 6, which is 12, minus my 6, which would give me 6. So at 6 on the x-axis and go up all the way to +6, you should put a point. So now the second thing we're going to do, make sure they line up. Yep, makes a straight line. Now I'm going to draw my straight line. Make sure you put the arrows at the end. And there's your graph. Let's do the last one together. So it says the amount P in dollars that you earn by working H number of hours is represented by this equation. P equals 9H. We need to complete the table. So for this one, let's do our x's by ones. So let's do, since our x's are counting by ones, let's skip around. Let's do 2, 4, 6, and 8. So what you're going to do is you're going to plug in 2 for H. So what's 9 times a 2, which is going to give me 18. So my first point on my graph should be 2, 18. So I'm going to go over to 2, and since it's counting by tens on my y-axis, we're actually going to put it pretty close to 20, but not touching 20 because we don't necessarily, well, it's not necessarily 20, it's 18. So now plug in 4 for your equation. What's 9 times 4? 9 times 4 is going to give me 36. So let's solve all the rest of these, and then we're going to graph them. Next, I'm going to do 9 times 6, which should give me what? 54. And last one, 9 times our 8 is going to give me what? 72. You're right. So now let's graph. When we did 218, now we're going to do 4. We're going to go to the right 4 and all the way up to 36. So it's going to be slightly larger than 35. And then we're going to go over to 6 and go over to 54, which is a little bit less than 55, right? And then 8 and 72, which is going to be a little bit higher. So now I'm going to take my straight edge, and now I'm going to draw my line. Wow, look at that. Look how straight that line is. How exciting. So now that we have graphed it, make sure you draw the ends, right? And now you are ready to complete your PFA. I'm sorry, your next checkpoint.